Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving into a topic that, well, it really reveals some serious vulnerabilities within our educational system. We're talking about fraud.
hmm And how it impacts colleges, financial aid programs, and ultimately, all of us.
Exactly. It's a really complex problem, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It shows up in so many different ways. Sometimes it's individuals just exploiting loopholes for, quick cash. Other times it's much more sophisticated organized crime rings even.
And sometimes it's internal failures, right,
Yeah,
within the institutions themselves.
precisely. We're looking at a whole range of things today. Financial aid scams, yeah, but also outright theft, manipulating grades, misreporting official numbers. It's quite a list.
And we'll definitely get into how the fight against this is evolving, detection, prevention, and where technology like AI fits in. Because that's a double-edged sword, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
Sometimes helping the fraudsters, sometimes hopefully helping the good guys catch them.
So our mission today, really, for you listening, is to navigate this whole landscape. We want you to get a clear picture of the different forms this education fraud can take.
Yeah, and to grasp its impact. Because it hits students, it hits the colleges, it hits taxpayers, and importantly, what's being done about it.
And maybe even what you can do if, heaven forbid, you're ever affected by something like identity theft related to this.
Exactly.
Okay, but before we dive in, just a quick word from our sponsor.
This deep dive is sponsored by Stonefly. They're a leader in enterprise storage, backup and disaster recovery, AI storage, and cloud solutions.
And if you're looking for really secure, ransomware-proof storage, Stonefly sells air-gapped and immutable storage solutions. Solid stuff.
Absolutely. You can contact sales at stonefly.com to schedule a demo if that's something you need. That's sales at stonefly.com. All right, let's jump into some specific examples then. I think looking back at some real-world cases really helps lay the groundwork, understand the different ways this happens.
Definitely. Case studies make it concrete. Let's start with financial aid fraud. There was this big Pell Runner scam, right, at ABC College back in 2013.
Yes, that
Yeah.
one. It was pretty significant. Nearly 24 people ended up being charged in that case.
And it's a classic example of this Pell Runner thing.
It really is. Essentially, it involves people taking advantage of the federal Pell Grant program, the one designed to help low-income students actually afford college.
So how did it work there at ABC College? What was the mechanism?
Well, the basic idea is fraudulent enrollment just to steal the grant money. People apply for financial aid, the Pell Grants, giving false info about their income, their situation, basically lying to qualify.
Okay.
Then, once the aid is approved and the money comes through, usually it covers tuition and fees first, and then any leftover amount, the credit balance, gets refunded to the student for living expenses.
That refund check is the target.
That's the target, exactly. They take that refund check and they just disappear. Withdraw from classes, maybe never even attended in the first place.
So they're just enrolling to get their hands on that money.
Precisely. And the way the money was split in the ABC College case really shows it. Students were getting about $2,775 per semester in aid.
Correct.
The ringleader's cut, according to the investigation, was around $675 from each of those students each semester.
Wow, that's like a 25% commission almost.
Roughly, yeah. Right off the top. It clearly shows it wasn't about education. It was about extracting that cash.
That structure, that cut, it suggests a pretty organized setup. Was this just like a few people doing this casually?
Oh, no, definitely not casual. This was run much more like a business. The ringleader was actively recruiting people to pose as these fake students.
How? How are they recruiting?
Using things like flyers, apparently, and even having recruits sign contracts that laid out the deal.
Contracts. Seriously?
Yeah. Then the ringleader would get all their personal information, social security numbers, dates of birth, and use that to enroll them in classes and fill out all the financial aid applications online. It was designed for scale, not just a one-off thing.
Okay, so if it was that organized, how did they eventually get caught? What tripped them up?
Well, this is where it often happens. A seemingly small detail brings the whole thing down. The fraud was discovered after one student who'd been recruited into it actually came forward to the authorities.
Ah, okay. A whistleblower, essentially.
Kind of, yeah. And when the investigators, it was the FBI and the Department of Education's own investigators, the OIG, started digging into the college's records.
What did they find?
They found something incredibly suspicious. All 22 people involved in this scam listed the same 2 residential addresses.
Wait, all 22? Sharing just two addresses.
Exactly. And guess who those addresses belong to?
The ringleader.
The ringleader is an immediate massive red flag pointing to a coordinated operation being run right out of those places.
That's amazing. Just that one data point. It really shows how basic data analysis, if someone had just looked, could potentially stopped this way earlier.
Absolutely. That shared address detail is such a critical takeaway. It highlights how data that the institution already has student addresses could reveal major fraud rings if it's just cross-referenced or analyzed. A simple IT report comparing addresses could have flagged this long before that student came forward.
But there is another layer to this case, right? Something even weirder involving grades.
Yes, this is the part that triggered an internal investigation at the college district first. These phony students, the ones who never went to class,
Yeah.
they were somehow getting passing grades as BSCS, specifically in drama classes.
Drama classes.
Well, that's what the internal investigation looked into. They focused on the drama department because that's where these impossible grades were appearing. Now, they didn't find criminal wrongdoing by the instructors involved, but it certainly raised serious questions about the grading process, about oversight. The instructor mainly involved did end up resigning, but interestingly, they kept their retirement benefits.
Which, again, suggests maybe some blind spots or perhaps a lack of really strict accountability when it came to grading controls.
Exactly. It points to potential weaknesses there.
So looking back at this whole ABC college case,
Yeah.
what were the big control failures? What allowed this Pell Runner scam and the weird grade stuff to happen?
Several key things stand out. First, like we just said, the lack of proactive data analysis. That address check is a prime example.
Right.
Second, there is clearly a breakdown in training attendance. Colleges are supposed to have rules. You don't show up, you get dropped.
Yeah, you get dropped from the roll.
Exactly. But these fake students stayed enrolled, which also means the college was probably claiming FTS funding for them.
that's full-time equivalent students, right? The basis for state funding.
That's it. So they were likely getting state money for students who weren't actually there. That points to a failure in enforcing attendance policies and keeping enrollment accurate.
And the grading issue implies a whole other layer of weak controls or lack of oversight there, too. So for you listening, this case, even though it's from 2013, it really offers some timeless lessons. Simple data checks, basic IT functions can potentially uncover major fraud. And it shows how fundamental things like tracking attendance and ensuring grading integrity are crucial. When those fail, it undermines the whole system and wastes public money. Okay, let's shift gears now to a different kind of fraud. This one hits right at the core of academic records themselves. Cash for grades. This was at XYZ College around 2007.
Ah, yes, the cash for grades scandal. That was a big one. It involved people paying to have their grades changed in the official college records.
And the scale was pretty significant.
It was huge. Ultimately, 34 current and former students got charged with felony fraud and conspiracy.
Yeah.
The person identified as the ringleader faced something like 23 felony counts. Potential prison time was, I think, nearly 70 years on paper.
Wow. So how did it work? Who was actually changing the grades?
This is the shocking part. It relied on a massive vulnerability. Students working at the college who had access to the computer systems were taking cash from other students to go in and change their grades.
Student employees had access to change grades. That sounds like a terrible idea.
It's a recipe for exactly this kind of disaster. You can imagine the implications when this news broke.
I bet. What was the fallout?
It was immense. College registrars everywhere were talking about it because it just shakes the foundation of trust in academic transcripts. If you can just buy grades, what does a degree even mean?
Good point.
XYZ College itself was looking at expelling the students involved, and there was serious talk about rescinding degrees for alumni who might have used those altered transcripts to transfer to other universities. It severely damaged the college's credibility.
And the context at the college at the time, did that play a role? It sounds like they were having some institutional struggles.
Yes, the material notes that. The college was dealing with chronically declining enrollment. Staff morale was low because of pay cuts across the district. There was a lot of financial uncertainty.
So maybe oversight got stretched then.
It's possible. While those issues certainly don't excuse the fraud, you can see how an environment like that might, contribute to lax procedures or things falling through the cracks, allowing a scheme like this to go unnoticed for quite a while.
And it did go on for a long time, didn't it? Like 7 years.
Reportedly, yes.
Yeah.
About 7 years. Ringleaders were making thousands,
Yeah.
apparently meeting students pretty openly, like in malls, to make the exchange. Money for grade changes.
But that core vulnerability you mentioned, the access student employees had. That seems central.
Absolutely critical. The whole thing was possible because of what was described as a wide open grade management system. And here's the most astonishing detail. Nearly 90 people. 90 people, including student employees, had authorization in the computer system to change grades.
That's not just a few administrators.
No. It was this huge group with modification privileges. That's just a fundamental, massive breakdown in basic access controls and security principles. You cannot have that many people, let alone student workers, able to alter official academic records.
So what controls should have been in place? What was needed to prevent this?
Well, it's pretty clear in hindsight, and honestly, it should have been standard practice anyway. First, IT access for students should have been strictly read only for academic records. No modification ability,
That
period.
makes sense.
Second, and this is crucial, the ability to change grades needs to be restricted to a very small, tightly controlled group of trusted individuals. Probably just a couple of people in the admissions and records department, maybe a supervisor.
Not 90.
Definitely not 90. Granting that level of access so widely, especially to students, just shows a critical failure in understanding data security and internal controls.
This case really just hammers home how compromising academic records undermines the whole point of higher education. For you listening, think about it. It affects the value of any degree from that place during that time. And more broadly, it shows how much the integrity of your own achievements, or those of your peers, relies on strong institutional security. When those systems are wide open, as they put it, trust just evaporates. Okay, let's pivot again. Another time of internal fraud. This time, it's straightforward theft by an employee. This happened at Missouri College, involved a purchasing agent around 2014.
Right. This was a case of internal misappropriation, basically stealing from the employer. The accused was the lead purchasing agent for the college.
And they stole a significant amount.
Allegedly, yes. $336,000 over several years.
What was the method?
It was the classic fake vendor scheme. The purchasing agent set up a phony janitorial company.
Okay.
And then, because they were the lead purchasing agent in charge of vendors and supplies, they basically started approving and paying invoices from their own fake company for janitorial services that were never actually performed.
So they were essentially just paying themselves with college money.
Exactly. Using the fake company as a front.
And $336,000 over, 7 years?
That's right. The fraud occurred over a 7-year period. And interestingly, the material mentions the scheme might have started even before this person became the lead buyer in 2010.
Really? So maybe they were exploiting a weakness that was already there?
Could be. Or they started smaller and then escalated it once they had more authority in the lead role. Either way, it went on for a long time. The accused pleaded not guilty, faced multiple felony counts, potential prison time.
How did Missouri College react when this came to light?
They acted pretty quickly on the process side. They changed their internal auditing procedures right away. A key change was requiring more than one person to sign off on purchases and vendor payments, adding that layer of approval.
Makes sense. Segregation of duties.
Exactly. They also brought in an outside forensic auditor to do a deep dive into their purchasing and financial controls. Fortunately for them, their insurance covered most of the monetary loss.
Most of it.
Yeah, they still had a $500 deductible they had to cover. But insurance took care of the bulk of the $336,000.
Still, even with insurance, the fact that $336,000 could be stolen over 7 years points to some pretty serious gaps, right? What went wrong?
The main failure was definitely that lack of segregation of duties and proper approval processes. Letting one person, even a lead agent, control vendor selection, invoice approval, and payment initiation without a second check. That's a classic control weakness.
Right.
Another likely failure was not having checks in place to compare vendor information against employee information. Simple checks could flag if a vendor's address, or maybe their bank account, matches an employee's.
Good point. Could have caught the fake company link.
Potentially, yes. And while the material doesn't explicitly state this for this case, it certainly raises questions about IT controls too. Were there enough checks to stop an employee from just creating a phony vendor in the financial system in the first place?
This case is a good reminder that fraud isn't always super high-tech or complicated. Sometimes it's just exploiting basic administrative loopholes. For you listening, it really highlights why those fundamental financial controls, like needing 2 signatures, like checking vendor details, are so vital in any organization, especially educational institutions handling tuition and taxpayer funds. Protecting that money requires diligence. Okay. Our final case study takes us to Cactus College. And this illustrates yet another angle, misrepresenting data deliberately to get more funding.
Right. This involved concerns from the state oversight body, the California Community College's Chancellor's Office, CCCCO. They were worried about incorrectly reported FTES numbers.
FTES, again, full-time equivalent students, that number drives funding.
Exactly. And the concern was about incorrect reporting over a long period, 8 years, from 2004 to 2010. It stemmed from irregularities in how the college was tracking and reporting student attendance.
So how did they manage to inflate their student numbers for that long?
The core issue went back to a decision made in March 2004. The college decided to stop using actual student attendance hours, or even scheduled hours, for their calculation.
What do they use instead?
They decided to use catalog hours. Basically, the number of hours listed for the course in the official college catalog.
And why is that a problem?
Because, as the material clearly states, using catalog hours instead of actual attendance almost always overstates the real number of hours students are in class. Students drop, sections might run short. Relying on the catalog number inherently inflates the calculation.
Leading to inflated FTES numbers.
Precisely.
Yep.
Which leads to getting more state funding than they were actually entitled to based on real attendance.
And this wasn't just some, accounting error or misinterpretation, was it? It sounds like senior leadership knew what was going on.
This is where it gets really concerning from a governance standpoint. The material indicates senior management knew about this calculation method and its potential to inflate FTEs right from the start, back in 2004. 2 vice presidents were apparently at the meeting where this method was approved.
Okay.
And then, year after year, the college president signed off on the official state attendance, reports these forms called CCFS 320s, certifying that the information was true and accurate.
Even though
they were reportedly notified multiple times by a senior consultant, the person who actually prepared the reports for them, that the numbers were incorrect because of this calculation method.
So they knew the method was questionable, were told the numbers were wrong, and still certified them as accurate.
That appears to be the case.
Yeah.
The resulting difference, the overstatement, was between 2% and 4% each year, from 2005-06 through 2009-10.
2 to 4% might sound small, but over 8 years.
It adds up significantly.
Right.
An independent audit firm came in later to review and correct the FTS numbers for that entire 8-year period.
And the final tally.
They confirmed that the college had been overpaid by the state by more than $5.2 million because of these reporting irregularities.
Wow. Over $5 million in funding based on inflated numbers. What kind of fraud category does this fall into?
This is pretty clearly fraudulent statements. It's the deliberate misrepresentation of official data. In this case, student enrollment numbers on reports submitted to a government agency to get funding.
And the key control failures that let this systematic misreporting happen for so long.
The material really points to a weak tone at the top, a lack of emphasis on ethical reporting from the highest levels of leadership. When VPs and presidents know about questionable methods, are warned about inaccuracies, and still sign off on the reports.
It sends a message.
It sends a powerful message down through the organization that maybe accuracy and ethics aren't the absolute top priority. This kind of weak tone can undermine any formal rules or ethical guidelines you might have on paper. There was also likely a lack of effective fraud communication channels, ways for people lower down to raise concerns safely.
This case really impacts how we think about public funding allocation and the integrity of reporting. For you listening, it shows how deliberate misrepresentation, even if it seems like just a small percentage tweak, can lead to millions in misused public funds over time. That ultimately affects the resources available for real students and programs across the entire system. Okay, so let's bring this more current now. Moving from those specific past cases to a problem that's become much more widespread, especially with online learning booming. Let's talk more about those Pell runners we mentioned earlier.
Yes, this issue has absolutely exploded in recent years. The basic concept is the same as the ABC college case enroll. Get financial aid like Pell Grants, grab the refund, disappear. But the scale, the sophistication, it's dramatically increased.
Yeah, and online education is a big factor.
A huge factor. It removes the need for any physical presence. You don't have to show up on campus, maybe not even log into a class synchronously. This makes it so much easier to perpetrate these scams at scale.
The cost to taxpayers must be enormous.
It really is. Estimates for annual losses, just from Pell Grant fraud, run into the billions of dollars. Some experts, like Mark Kantrowitz, estimate that maybe 3.6% or even more of all Pell disbursements could be fraudulent. often linked to students who get the money but never earn any credits, never get near a degree.
And that's grown over time.
Massively. Back in 2003, the estimate was maybe $300 million. But the Pell Grant program itself has more than tripled in size since then, and the fraud seems to have kept pace, or maybe even accelerated.
And we're seeing this hit places like California's community colleges really hard, right? They're a major entry point for students.
Absolutely. The California community college system has reported a huge surge in this kind of fraud. Since just fall 2021, they've identified over $5 million paid out to Pell runners in federal Pell Grants.
This federal grants.
Yes, plus another nearly $1.5 million in state and local aid on top of that. The problem got so bad that the state chancellor's office had to start requiring colleges to specifically report these cases about 3 years ago.
And the number of fake applications they're catching, it's staggering.
It is. The California Student Aid Commission, which handles state aid applications, identified over 65,000 fake applications tied to potential fraud rings. 65,000. That tells you this isn't just isolated incidents. It's large-scale, often highly organized crime.
And online education, as you said, makes it easier.
It's a critical enabler. No need to show up in person. The Department of Education's OIG saw a dramatic jump in investigations involving online programs way back between 2005 and 2011, and it's only gotten worse since then. Fraud rings recruit people or use stolen identities to enroll dozens, maybe hundreds of these straw students in online programs.
And they just apply for grants and loans, collect the money.
Collect the refunds, kick back a portion to the ringleader, and the college and the government are left holding the bag.
Now layer AI onto this whole mess. It sounds like the fraudsters are using AI to make things even worse.
They absolutely are. Criminals are smart, and they adopt new tools quickly. AI is being used to make these scams more efficient, harder to detect. There was a report that as of January 2025, suspected bots accounted for maybe 1 in 4 college applicants in California.
1 in 4 applicants might be bots.
Suspected bots, yeah.
Yeah.
They're using AI chatbots to automate filling out applications, maybe generate fake essays or documents, potentially even submit some basic coursework for the Go students in online classes to maintain the illusion of attendance for a while.
There was that story about Wayne Chaw that really brings home how creepy this AI-driven fraud can feel.
Right. Identity thieves used his social security number, got about $1,400 in aid in his name. He starts getting emails about a class he never signed up for, but the part he called very freaky was discovering that someone, or something likely a chatbot, was submitting homework assignments impersonating him, using his name on the submissions. It's like this a digital ghost created by ID theft and AI interacting with the college system. Chillin'.
And the FBI acknowledges how serious and widespread this is.
Oh, yeah. Their website talks about Pell Grant fraud being widespread. They point out that technology and changes in how colleges operate are creating new avenues for criminals. And they make a key point. Law enforcement is usually reactive. They investigate after the fraud happens.
So the colleges have to be proactive.
Exactly. The FBI stresses that colleges must be proactive. Things like better verification up front, dropping students who don't engage immediately, being super careful about dispersing those refund checks.
This really drives home that it's not just some abstract government money problem. For you listening, this can hit you directly. Identity theft from these scams can happen to anyone, student or not. It messes up your credit, causes huge stress, and it also hurts real students trying to get into classes, as we'll discuss.
Okay, let's dig into those tangible negative consequences more. Beyond the lost money, what's the real-world impact? On the colleges, on actual students, on taxpayers? The impact on the colleges is pretty severe and comes in multiple forms. First, there's the direct financial loss. Money stolen via fake aid that the college might have to repay or write off. Or internal theft, like the purchasing agent case.
But it's more than just the cash, right?
Much more. There's huge operational disruption. These fake students take up slots in classes. Sometimes they inflate enrollment numbers so much that colleges open extra sections of courses.
Only for those sections to be empty later.
Exactly. Once the Go students are found and purged, those extra sections might be nearly empty. It wastes faculty time, classroom resources, scheduling efforts. There was that example from Pierce College in California.
Yeah, what happened there?
After they purged a large number of these Go students, their official enrollment numbers plummeted by almost 36%. They went from over 7,600 students down to under 5,000. That gives you a sense of how many phantom students were clogging up the system.
Wow, that's massive.
And think about the staff time. Admissions, IT, financial aid, even faculty. They all end up spending countless hours scrutinizing applications, monitoring for suspicious behavior, investigating potential fraud, cleaning up the data afterwards. It's a huge drain. And then there are the financial write-offs. The College of Southern Nevada reportedly wrote off $7.4 million in fraudulent aid in just one semester, fall 2024.
And you mentioned cybersecurity risks, too, from all these fake accounts.
Absolutely. Every fake account is an unauthorized presence on the network. It increases the potential attack surface. It could be exploited for other malicious activities. The material even mentioned that colleges were hitting cloud storage limits with providers like Google and Microsoft, partly because thousands of fake accounts were just sitting there consuming storage space.
Okay, so that's the impact on institutions. What about the people most directly harmed, the real students and the taxpayers?
This is where it gets incredibly personal and damaging. First, taxpayers are losing billions through fraudulent Pell Grants and loans. Money meant for education, just stolen. Second, real students get hurt. They get locked out of classes they need. When bots induce students fill up course sections, hitting enrollment caps, legitimate students who are trying to progress towards their degree can't register. It delays their graduation, adds frustration.
And then there's the identity theft angle, which sounds devastating.
It is probably the most direct and harmful impact on individuals. Victims suddenly find out student loans were taken out using their identity, often for colleges they've never even heard of.
What happens then?
They're left dealing with the fallout. Damaged credit scores, maybe debt collectors harassing them, and this incredibly stressful, long, frustrating process of proving they're victims, fighting to get those fraudulent loans off their record.
The personal stories shared really illustrate that struggle. Heather Brady's experience sounds like a nightmare.
It does. A police officer shows up at her door asking about a college she didn't apply to. She checks her student loan account online, just curious, and finds a $9,000 loan paid out in her name using her social security number, but sent to someone else attending a different college. She described trying to fix it, contacting lenders, federal student aid servicers, as just this endless, frustrating ordeal.
And Brittany Nelson's story. It shows how long this can drag on, even if you have protections in place.
Yeah, she ran her own business, never went to college. Suddenly, her credit score drops 27 points. Finds out loans were taken out in her name for colleges in California and Louisiana. One loan for over $5,000 went into forbearance while she fought it. And even though she had identity theft protection services,
It still took how long?
it took her 2 years of constant effort to finally get those fraudulent loans removed from her credit history.
Yeah.
2 years. She compared the feeling to someone breaking into your house and robbing you.
These stories really put a human face on the statistics. For you listening, these are the real stakes. Your identity could be stolen, messing up your finances for years. It underscores how damaging this fraud is, affecting individuals profoundly, beyond just the cost to institutions or taxpayers. So, given all this, the scale, the different types of fraud, the impact what's being done to fight back, what controls are colleges putting in place? What are the feds doing?
Well, the response is definitely ramping up, driven by how sophisticated and common these scams have become, especially with online learning and AI in the mix. It's happening on multiple fronts. Institutions are tightening their internal controls, and federal agencies are rolling out stricter verification processes.
Let's go back to those case studies. What lessons learned are translating into better controls now?
Based on those examples, colleges are recognizing the need for things like, well, that address verification report we talked about from this ABC College case, automatically flagging multiple students at one address. They need better procedures to quickly drop non-attending students, preventing fake FTES claims. The Cash for Grades case. The lesson is crystal clear. Severely limit IT access for students read-only for records and restrict grade changing to just a tiny number of trusted staff.
Not 90 people.
Definitely not 90. From the purchasing theft, the need for mandatory second-level approvals on all purchases and vendor setups is obvious. Plus, checking vendor info against employee data. And the FTE's misreporting case highlights the need for a strong ethical tone at the top and safe channels for reporting concerns.
So fixing past mistakes, what about general proactive prevention tactics that colleges are using now?
There's a growing focus on empowering the whole community, training students, faculty, staff on what fraud looks like, how to spot red flags, and where to report it. Strengthening basic security protocols is ongoing. Better encryption, firewalls, network monitoring, using specific fraud detection software, keeping everything updated.
And with ID theft being so central to the Pell Runner scams, verification has to be a priority.
Huge priority. Colleges are looking at and implementing stronger ID checks, multi-factor authentication for logging in, exploring biometrics, Maybe requiring a live video check with an ID during online applications, requiring social security numbers where they can.
What about delaying access?
Some are trying that. Not giving full email or network access until identity is confirmed, maybe through a physical check or a trusted verification service, even for online students. And simple things like promptly dropping students who just don't show up for the first class. Also, trying to build more centralized systems that can connect data across departments, admissions, financial aid registration to spot discrepancies faster.
Okay, that's the institutional level. But the U.S. Department of Education is also stepping up significantly, right? They announced a big crackdown recently.
They did in June 2025. It's a major push to combat student aid fraud, especially identity theft. They're using both temporary measures and developing permanent fixes.
What's this temporary rule for summer 2025?
For this summer term, they're requiring about 125,000 first-time federal student aid applicants to prove who they are using a government-issued photo ID.
How?
Either in person at the college or through a live video conference with someone at the institution. And the colleges have to keep copies of the IDs used for verification.
Okay, so that's a specific group. What's the longer-term plan for all applicants starting in the fall?
The plan is to roll out a permanent, comprehensive screening process for all AFSA applicants starting fall 2025. The goal is to catch identity fraud much earlier. They're also bringing back some automated checks that had been paused.
Like what?
Cross-checking applicant data with the Social Security Administration and the Department of Homeland Security records. Apparently, pausing those checks led to about $90 million in wrong payments, and going to people who had died or weren't eligible citizens. So restoring those is key.
And they're changing the rules for that extra verification, the V4, V5 process.
Yes, making it hopefully a bit less burdensome, but still secure. They're dropping the requirement for that Statement of Educational Purpose form. Instead, they'll accept ID verification via live video conference or through approved third-party services that meet high standards. NIST ILL2 compliant is the term. Or for incarcerated students, verification by prison officials. And these new rules apply even if you were already selected for verification under the old system.
And there's more pressure on the colleges now to detect and report fraud.
Absolutely. Colleges are now explicitly required to report suspected fraud directly to the Department of Education's Inspector General. They also have to have systems in place to spot discrepancies and must immediately stop paying out aid if they discover fraud. Any money already paid to someone ineligible. The college has to treat that as an overpayment they need to deal with. And there are individuals or institutions submitting false claims can face serious civil or criminal penalties under things like the False Claims Act.
And they resumed those checks using the big student loan database.
Yes, the post-screening using the National Student Loan Data System restarted in May. That helps flag people who've already hit their lifetime Pell Grant limits or are ineligible for other reasons. That check was also suspended during the pandemic, and federal student aid is ramping up its use of machine learning.
AI again, but for detection this time.
Exactly. Using ML models to analyze HAFSA data, look for inconsistencies, red flags. They estimate this has already prevented maybe $40 million in fraudulent direct loans and $6 million in Pell Grants just by flagging suspicious applications early.
Okay, these are clearly some significant steps. Trying to protect taxpayer money, make sure aid goes to real students. But for you listening, you can see how these new requirements showing ID, maybe doing a video call, potential delays, might add hurdles for legitimate students just trying to get through the already complex aid process. It's probably a necessary trade-off, but it could have real impacts on access and timing. We've touched on how fraudsters use AI, but let's flip that. How can AI and machine learning actually help fight fraud? The material explores this quite a bit.
Right, this is that double-edged sword aspect we mentioned. While criminals use AI, the good guys' institutions, the government are definitely looking at how AI and ML can be powerful tools for prevention and detection.
So what are some of the potential upsides? How could AI help?
The potential is pretty broad. AI can optimize a lot of the administrative grind, automating tasks like putting aid packages together, reconciling funds, checking eligibility based on need or merit that can reduce errors and speed things up.
Making the process smoother for everyone.
Hopefully. It can also enhance decision-making. AI can analyze huge amounts of data on aid distribution, enrollment trends, maybe even repayment patterns to help institutions develop smarter, more data-driven strategies for allocating aid and spotting risks.
And specifically for finding the fraud.
That's a major area. AI and ML are really good at spotting patterns and anomalies in massive data sets. They can compare info across applications, income versus tax records, addresses used multiple times, weird enrollment histories, flagging things human reviewers might miss.
Can it monitor things after the aid is given out?
Potentially, yes. Monitoring academic progress, or lack thereof, alongside financial aid status might help detect anomalies suggesting someone isn't really participating.
Right.
Maybe a Pell Runner situation developing.
The material also mentioned using AI to tailor aid packages. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, that's a fascinating idea. AI could potentially look beyond just financial need, analyzing maybe academic background, activities, demographics, to understand a student's unique situation better and recommend more personalized aid packages, the right mix of grants, scholarships, maybe loans.
Could that help with access and equity?
That's the hope. By better matching aid to individuals, it could help bridge financial gaps and potentially identify and reach out to students from underserved communities who might not even know what aid they're eligible for, kind of democratizing access.
Okay, that all sounds really promising, but powerful tech always comes with risks, right? What are the roadblocks or dangers with using AI here?
Oh, absolutely. Implementing AML in financial aid isn't simple, and there are significant risks to watch out for. A big one is explainability. These complex AI models can be like black boxes. It's hard to know why it made a certain decision.
Why was this student flagged? Why this aid amount?
Exactly. That lack of transparency can really damage trust with students, staff, even regulators.
And the risk of bias is huge, especially with financial decisions.
Critical point. AI learns from historical data. If that data reflects past biases, racial, economic, whatever, the AI can learn and amplify those biases. That could lead to discriminatory outcomes in who gets aid or who gets flagged for fraud review. It's a major ethical concern.
Data quality matters too, I assume. Garbage in, garbage out.
Precisely. The AI is only as good as the data it's trained on. If the data is bad, incomplete, or doesn't represent the whole student population fairly, the AI's predictions will be inaccurate or skewed.
And the models themselves can drift or get too specific.
Yeah, they learn dynamically, which means they can change over time in unexpected ways. There's also overfitting. The model gets too good at matching the training data, but then doesn't work well on new, real-world applicants.
And cybersecurity, these systems handle sensitive data.
Always a risk. They're data-rich targets. A breach could expose huge amounts of personal and financial information. And then there's the whole liability question. If an AI makes a bad call, wrongly denies aid, falsely accuses someone of fraud who's responsible, the college, the vendor who made the AI, it's murky legal territory. So the big challenge is harnessing the benefits while actively managing these risks. The material suggests working closely with regulators is key, developing strategies for transparency, fairness, data quality, preventing bias and overfitting, and building in strong security from the start.
For you listening, this really shows how AI is a complex factor here. It gives fraudsters new tools, but it also offers powerful ways to detect fraud and maybe even improve the aid process. How we balance those capabilities and risks will be a huge part of the future for education administration. Now, given how often identity theft comes up in these modern scams, it's really important to know what to do if you become a victim. What if you find out fraudulent student loans or aid were taken out in your name? The material gives a pretty clear 10-step guide.
Yeah, and discovering that is incredibly stressful. It can seriously mess up your credit, your financial life for years. Knowing the right steps to take, immediately and persistently, is crucial to minimize the damage and start cleaning things up.
Okay, step one. What's the absolute first thing you do if you find a fraudulent loan?
Priority number 1, contact the lender or the loan servicer directly associated with that specific fraudulent loan. Tell them right away you're an identity theft victim, this loan isn't yours. Ask them to freeze the account, stop any more money from going out, and, crucially, demand copies of all the paperwork, the application, any agreements, transaction records. You need that proof.
Okay, contact the lender. What's next?
Yes.
Law enforcement.
Yes, you absolutely need to file a police report with your local police department. Report the identity theft. Be specific about the fraudulent student loan lender, amount, everything you know. Get a copy of that official police report. It's vital evidence for disputing the fraud with credit bureaus and creditors later.
Got it. Police report, then the credit bureaus.
Right. Contact all 3 major ones, Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. Tell them you're an ID theft victim. Ask them to place a fraud alert on your credit file. That tells potential creditors to take extra steps to verify it's really you before opening new accounts.
Is a fraud alert enough? What about a credit freeze?
A credit freeze is even stronger. It basically locks down your credit files so no one can open new accounts without your explicit permission, usually using a PIN. A standard fraud alert lasts a year. An extended one for victims lasts 7 years. A freeze stays until you lift it. Choose based on your situation, but definitely get at least an alert on there immediately.
Okay, after contacting the bureaus, you need to check your actual reports.
Yes, and as an ID theft victim, you can get free copies of your reports from all 3 agencies. Go through them line by line. Look for the fraudulent loan, obviously, but also check for anything else, suspicious, other accounts you didn't open, inquiries you don't recognize, wrong addresses or names. Dispute every single inaccuracy you find in writing with each bureau separately.
What about the federal side? Do you need to tell the Department of Education?
Yes. Report the student loan fraud to Federal Student Aid, FSA. They handle federal aid programs and can offer guidance. You should also report suspected fraud generally to the OIG hotline, the Office of Inspector General for the Department of Ed.
And there's another federal report, right? With the FTC?
Correct. File an identity theft report with the Federal Trade Commission. You can do this online at identitytheft.gov. This creates an official record of your ID theft claim and gives you a personalized recovery plan. Keep a copy of this FTC report, too.
Do you also need to tell the college involved, the one the loan is supposedly for?
Definitely. Contact the financial aid office and the registrar at the college linked to the fraudulent loan. Send them a written dispute letter explaining the situation, preferably by certified mail so you have proof they got it. The school should have procedures to help victims.
And this isn't a one-and-done thing, is it? You have to keep watching.
Absolutely. Keep monitoring your credit reports regularly. Make sure no new fraud pops up. Keep those fraud alerts or freezes active for protection moving forward.
Documentation seems like a constant theme here. Keep records of everything.
Critically important. Document everything. Every phone call date, time, who you spoke to, what was said. Keep copies of every email, every letter sent and received, every statement. This detailed record is your ammunition. It proves what you've done and is invaluable if you run into problems or need to take legal action.
Which brings us to the last step, knowing when maybe you need a lawyer.
Right. If things get really complicated, or if the lenders or credit bureaus are just not cooperating and you're hitting a wall trying to get the fraudulent debt removed, consider talking to an attorney who specializes in this area, student loan ID theft, or Fair Credit Reporting Act, FCRA violations. They can guide you, negotiate for you, and potentially file lawsuits if your rights are being ignored. The material notes acting fast is important here too, because there are time limits, statutes of limitations, for taking legal action.
For you listening, finding out you're a victim of student loan ID theft is incredibly tough. It's stressful, it has potentially huge consequences, but knowing these 10 steps gives you a clear path forward. It takes persistence, patience, but acting fast and documenting everything are absolutely key to taking back control and clearing your name. So we've really covered a lot of ground today navigating this complex world of education fraud. We've seen the different shapes it takes from, old school internal theft and grade changing to these massive modern Pell runner scams that exploit online learning and are increasingly using AI.
And we've looked at the impact, the huge financial costs to colleges and taxpayers, but also those really devastating personal impacts on identity theft victims.
We dug into the control failures that allowed these things to happen, and importantly, the big efforts underway now to fight back. New federal rules, colleges, tightening controls, and this complicated role of AI, both a threat and a potential tool.
Understanding all these pieces is just so important, whether you're a student trying to figure out financial aid, an administrator working inside a college, or just a taxpayer funding the system. This landscape is changing fast, driven by tech and new ways of learning. Staying informed is really the first step.
And this deep dive was brought to you by Stonefly, a leader in enterprise storage, backup, and disaster recovery, AI storage, and cloud solutions.
Remember, if you need secure, ransomware-proof storage, Stonefly offers air-gapped and immutable storage. You can check them out.
Contact sales at stonefly.com to schedule a demo. That's sales at stonefly.com.
Okay, so to leave you with a final thought to chew on. Considering how fast technology and online learning are evolving and how quickly it seems fraudsters adapt, what completely new forms might education fraud take in the next few years? And maybe more importantly, will our defenses, our strategies be able to keep up?